Well, welcome everyone. I think we're going to get started. Excuse me for sitting down, but we're recording this today, so I want to get close enough to the mic so we can get all this on the record. And then when you folks are offering comments, will we be passing around a mic, Josh? Is that how we're going to do it? We'll have a mic to pass around to you so we make sure we don't lose any of the input we're getting. So thank you to the first of at least 6 local summits we're going to have regarding economic development in Dane County. I'm Dane County Executive Joe Parisi, and as you folks in this room know as well as anyone else, the times are changing, and county government needs to evolve with our changing times. We're no longer immune from statewide, national, or international economic downturns. So I think we all are in pretty much agreement that it's best to be proactive and to work together to shape our economic future in Dane County. So we will be holding a series, as I said, of at least 6 summits focusing on different sectors of the economy. And with that, let me just say that if the sector in which you're interested is not the heading of the topic of the summit that you're able to attend, that's okay. Feel free to share with us anyways. We're going to try to hit as many different sectors, but what we really want is input from as many people as possible regarding the future direction of economic growth in Dane County, and specifically how Dane County government can be of assistance. Because we've enjoyed relatively stable economy and really a higher standard of living than most of the state in Dane County, we haven't really focused on that a lot in the past. Perhaps haven't needed to focus on it as much. But again, as I mentioned earlier, times are changing, and we're going to start focusing. The input I get from these sessions, I'll be using to put together a proposal in my upcoming budget that will be introduced on October 1st. And I'll be proposing that we create either an Office of or Department of Economic Development within Dane County government. And so I'm really looking forward to the input we get through these series of summits and talks to kind of give some direction for that department. We want to assess the needs. We want to assess what works, what doesn't work, where there might be gaps in our overall economic scheme, and how the county can help. And while we're on the subject of the county, I'd like to introduce County Supervisor Carousel Baird is in back. This is her district, and she's here today. She's very interested in this subject also. So thank you, Supervisor Baird, for being here today. The way we're going to do this is Mark Buer, who most of you know, is going to facilitate today. And we're going to answer some of those questions I was just throwing out there. As you walked in, there was a yellow slip that we're hoping folks can sign in on, kind of a sign-in sheet. If you'd like to speak, this is Casey from my staff. She'll be coming around, and you can hand that in. And then when Mark gets started, he'll call you, and we'll bring a microphone to you. Okay. There's also this survey that we're hoping folks will fill out that goes maybe a little more in-depth than we might be able to get on some of the topics today. We'd encourage you to fill this out and hand it in at the end of the day. Or if that doesn't work out for you, this is also on our webpage, prosperitydane.org. And please feel free to go there and have anyone else you know who's interested in economic development in Dane County and wants to add something, to have them go on and fill out the online form and get that information to us. So that said, I think we'll get on with it. Mark Buer, again, thank you so much for hosting us here today and agreeing to facilitate this event. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming this afternoon. Thanks to our newly minted county executive for holding these sessions all over Dane County. Economic development and job creation is more critical today than it's ever been, obviously. And so we appreciate those of us that are involved in sort of the high-tech, biotech, early-stage startup industry, business here in Dane County, appreciate the county exec's focus on economic development and job creation in Dane County. And we pledge to do everything we can to help any way that we can in improving the economy here in Dane County. And by the looks of the gathering here today, all of you are equally as committed. I think the county exec has laid out the format for today. As the facilitator, I'm here to kind of crack the whip and get you to speak. If you're reluctant, shy, that sort of thing, we'll try and get you drawn out a little bit. We do have, as he mentioned, yellow sheets, which are the registration forms, which also indicate whether you wish to make a presentation or ask a question or make a comment. And so we'll go off of those first. But I would hope that you keep in mind the county executive's sort of broad framework on what we'd like to hear from you today, and that is along the lines of what's working well in Dane County. We have a great economy in Dane County, but it could be better, obviously. Things are changing, times are changing. Public sector employment is changing. Private sector employment is going to have to fill the void, obviously, for some of that. What's working but has room for improvement, clearly, is a goal and objective, trying to identify those areas where the county executive and Dane County can focus on the needs of the county to try and improve our economy, what's missing and what's needed in our overall effort here in Dane County with job creation and economic development. So I think bottom line is I applaud the county executive for coming out, reaching out and listening to you, as opposed to sometimes the traditional approach, which is to have people come and tell you what's wrong with the economy, what they're going to do to fix it. This way, those people like you that are involved in creating jobs, working in companies, and helping to support Dane County can inform the policymakers what's needed here in Dane County. So that is admirable in my view. So without any further ado, we have a couple of registrations that we can proceed with, and then we'll try and sort of open it up for sort of questions and comments and thoughts as we proceed throughout the afternoon. Just one little housekeeping item for those of you, because of the temperatures outside, we've got some water here that we've provided to you, so feel free to go and help yourself to water. Bathrooms are right across the hallway in case that's a need as well. So our first presenter is, I hope I have this right, is it Marin or Marnie?
Marnie Beckendahl.
Beckendahl? Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
if they could raise their hand on the person with the mic.
Yeah, the person from the mic, if you want to raise your hand when you're called on, person from the mic can then deliver it. This is all being recorded, so we need to have your voice on the record. So is it Marnie?
Marnie, yes.
Okay, Marnie.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to talk this morning or this afternoon. I'm not sure if maybe I'll have a little bit of a different perspective than some of you may have planned. I'm here to actually just offer a few pieces of insight for highlighting why childcare is a critical component of building an attractive place for competitive industries. I am a neuroscientist. I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I've been in my professional career since 1997. I don't think that I actually have an experience that's going to be very different from the types of people who might wish to come join a biotech career here in Wisconsin. I've also spent about 8 years hiring people into those positions, so can offer you some perspective on that. First of all, parents care about their kids. It's a universal thing, regardless of your income, regardless of your gender, your age, or your race. And it's also fairly universal that finding good childcare can be fairly difficult and a real time-consuming task. It's challenging to find that in a price range that people can afford, and it also is a profession in our community. So when we think about job creation, when you create jobs in one place, those folks are going to need care for their children. Many of them will. A perspective I'd like to offer in terms of folks who might be in a biotech industry is that many of us have gone on to get advanced degrees, which means many of us have also delayed starting our families. So we're going to come into our careers with very young families, perhaps not even having started them when we first arrived. So when we hire those folks and when we try to recruit them here, we need to understand that that's where they will be in their lives. They will probably have fairly young families. They also come with fairly specialized skills, and because they come with those, it means they can't get a job just anywhere. So many of them are going to have to move someplace. They're going to have to relocate, and for many of us that means we don't get to go where our parents live, so we can't call grandma and grandpa to babysit, and we won't be living where our siblings live, so we can't call aunts and uncles to take care of our children. We get to these places, we might not know anyone there, and we don't know who to ask to find good childcare. So we need an infrastructure that helps support us to find good care because we don't have that personal connection to that community yet. If you have good care, I can speak personally that I can focus so much better at work when I know that my kids are well cared for. I had a bonus of having from day one the #1 daycare provider here, and really was able to focus on my work when I was there. That's really all I have to offer. I'm happy to answer questions, but I just would like to ensure that when we have these discussions about attracting people to our community for these types of positions, that we consider them both as professionals as well as parents. Thanks.
And I'm from Parisi to just do a brief amount of follow-up in terms of data. What's sort of interesting is that Madison actually itself is one of the best places in the country. We're better than 20 entire states in terms of the availability of highly accredited care. Your problem is that that's because of the city of Madison. And so if you look at the chart that I dropped off to you, you'll see all these high numbers of really high quality childcare in the city of Madison and all this list of zeros outside the city of Madison. And so in terms of an interesting headache that we have at 4C, and we do a lot of relocations here, is that we've developed a very strong portion of the county that's very good and highly competitive for attracting younger technical people and highly skilled people, and then we have the rest of the county that has a gap. And what we need to develop is really a process by which we can accredit those programs. And we're at an interesting point because with the state moving into a Young Star system, 4C actually now has staff that I can identify and do some initial evaluations of who has a very good chance of becoming high quality and getting the actual certificate that says you're really, really good, which helps a lot in terms of identifying programs. But there's not enough money. And a lot of that is basically just funding. There's a mini grant program that we have access to, but it doesn't do enough to get someone accredited. And so what I'm really suggesting is as you think about economic development, especially within this area, and it's close to my heart because I have a daughter who's in neuroscience, and we aren't related, by the way. I know she's got a PhD in neuroscience. That I see it more as a public-private type of thing where we really need a small pool of flexible money. The basic structure for childcare in this country, and it's the only developed country that I know of that does it this way, is totally focused on low-income people. Everybody else every other country that we're competing with, whether it's China, whether it's Europe, has a system in which they look at the fact that it's important for all children to develop and they fund it. Our country doesn't do it that way. And so as a result, everything, including the Young Star system, is driven by low-income families. So the care for your neuroscientists and your care for your biotech people is as good as you're willing to able to put together for low-income families. And when you basically drive that, you then develop your care in those areas as opposed to where you actually need it for your industry. And to deal with the big problems of childcare takes a lot of money, but to deal with like an improvement process doesn't take that much money. It's something that literally we could be probably starting out and funding a handful of programs on a yearly basis for less than the cost of probably the cost of 3 or 4 kids. We could probably improve things for hundreds. So I hope you just consider that as you look at these issues, which I know are very complex. Thank you.
So George, just a follow-up for the group's edification. So you mentioned the city of Madison has a variety of options that are available, and you have this on your list, and Dane County, outside of the city of Madison, does not. What's lacking in Dane County government that exists in the city of Madison that would cause this disparity to occur? And what would it take to sort of a rising tide lifts all boats kind of theory?
Well, in terms of history, I mean, 4C's been around for 40 years. And about a year after we got started, our executive directors formed a city daycare unit within the city of Madison that was totally focused on accreditation and improvement of childcare. And so they actually have a local accrediting body. And it's far more elaborate than that because the Madison focus is almost solely on low-income children. So you see a very high dollar amount tied to it because there's a lot of other support services needed to keep those programs alive. But what we really need is to think that out, and it's, you know, and this hearing unfortunately is happening probably about 2 weeks earlier than it should be because I heard about it and have been thinking about this for a number of years, but we haven't had time to process it with staff. We're basically would need to look at how do we set up either an extension of the city of Madison or an option using some national accreditation services melded with, I would think, a flexible pot of money. Because what I've seen over the years when people try to improve childcare is doing it in a governmental straight down grant program quite often either encourages people to move too quickly or doesn't give enough flexibility for doing it. But I think that's basically what we're looking at. I mean, my ideal would be some amount of money for staffing that might come from the county or might come from someplace else, and a pot of private sector money that might be either in Madison Community Foundation or someplace else that could be drawn on as you identify programs that have a really good chance of becoming accredited and succeeding. And I think we're finding a lot of that within the county. The problem, I mean, not a huge amount, but we're looking at a number of different programs that could possibly do that. And the problem is that they're across the street from the city of Madison, they're out of luck. Mm-hmm. And as you know, there's boundary lines in Fitchburg, you know, and all over the place that basically means you're either on the tax base or you aren't on the tax base. So I think if we can figure out another structure or tied-in structure that could do that work within the broader basis of the county, we'd be a lot better off.
Okay.
And I don't think the initial cost would be incredibly large. So,
Do you want to comment on the influence of pre-K, 4-year-old kindergarten? Does that have any impact on what you're doing, or?
I think in some areas, I mean, in the areas in the city of Madison, that's having impact because people need to be accredited to be part of it. And there's sections of the city of the Madison School District that are not in the city of Madison. So again, you can have a child care center off, you know, on the southwest side or the south side and not be able to be accredited. But a lot of the people we're looking at are not really actually in the city. I mean, we're seeing programs in places like Verona that have a lot of potential, and other parts. I mean, Marnie is from Sun Prairie and got very lucky. There's people all over the place, and when the city of Madison had some federal dollars, they actually did some accreditation. So you have a city accredited center in DeForest, for instance, that's accredited by the city of Madison. But as your budgets get tight, it's going to be very hard to rationalize, I would think, on a local tax base doing something in another municipality. But I think your potential centers are all over the county, and there's not a huge amount because I think we'd want to have a pretty strict entry level in order to reduce the cost of actually doing the accreditation process. So I think you don't want to take anybody. You're going to say if you're at this level, you have a shot if you want to do it, and then you put the money into it and you basically get their quality up.
Okay,
So.
Very good. Thank you, George, Marty. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next person to register willing to or wishing to speak is Ken Harwood, WisconsinDevelopmentNews.com. Ken, where are you? You're behind the camera, so you want to stand up or move over so we can, or there you go.
Well, first I just wanted to say thank you. I commented in last week's newsletter that I've been involved in economic development in the Madison area for 6 years, and on a professional level and writing about it. Now I've moved to more rural pastures, but your predecessor never invited me to anything. And I was a local elected official, and I wrote, a fairly largely read economic development newsletter. So thank you for not only this meeting, but all the meetings that you're going to have. What I'd really like to hear from is you, so I've got a couple of issues that we're all probably buzzing about a little bit. One would be your definition of regional economic growth. I don't want to preface this too much, but your predecessor thought some of the communities surrounding Madison were spelled with a sprawl definition as opposed to a growth or a comprehensive regional plan. Secondly, I'd like to hear about your department because I think that's brilliant, although I'm a little bit afraid in that the last department that was imposed upon us was Parisi, and that didn't work out all that well.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, we knew that was coming up, right?
Sorry, well, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Regional plan.
Obviously, there are some. And then, and so your department, Parisi, and what is regional growth, and how do you see the the surrounding communities fitting into that.
Let me try to briefly address this, because what I really want to do today is hear from you folks. We spend a lot of time listening to folks. You spend a lot of time, or at least being talked to by people like me. And I'm happy, maybe this might be some of this conversation we might have to have at another time, because I really do want to hear from you folks. Regarding the department or the office of, or how this is going to be structured, it's going to depend on a lot of things. It's still in flux right now, and a lot of it's going to depend on some of the input we get from you. And that's why we're having these listening sessions. When I say regional, I mean regional. Dane County is Dane County, and what helps one of us helps all of us, as far as I'm concerned. But what I'd really like to hear from you folks is, what are your ideas about department versus non-department? What are your ideas for regional? What do you want on my radar screen? What do you want us to take away from this? And again, I'm not trying to avoid your question. We could chat some other time, but I really do want a chance to hear from folks here. In two aspects. County government, 50% of what we do is human services, 20% is public safety. We plow the streets, et cetera, et cetera. What can we do within the confines of county government, but also thinking outside the box? It doesn't have to be the traditional role of county government. What I really want to know is, how can our economic development entity, whatever that ends up looking like, best serve Dane County and best help foster economic development? Thanks.
Okay, you want to follow up, Ken?
Yeah, just a little bit. I guess I would give you a couple of perspectives. One, with regard to Parisi, it would be really helpful if you would involve the expertise of the communities and the planners that are already employed by these communities, already doing the job. We spent huge amounts of money in Verona to get comprehensive planning done and to bring a comprehensive plan to a board with a lot of professional insight. Hopefully you utilize those resources. Those people are trained, intelligent, well-staffed, lots of resources, and they're an asset to the county and available to you. Same thing with your department. I think having a department is great, but I think having a network of professionals in the region is really more important. The other thing is, we've all developed plans, and those plans are excellent, but they don't overlap. They're all little microcosms, and what we need to do is develop a comprehensive long-range plan for the county that takes the input of Sun Prairie and Fitchburg and Middleton and Verona and Monona and all of those communities into the basket. So if your department could sort of collect that, I guess those would be my thoughts, and I think you are in an excellent position to do that.
Thanks for your input.
Those are the two individuals that registered to ask a question. All of the rest of you out there are kind of shy today. Maybe it's the heat. So if you have, we'd like to try and gin up this conversation a little bit and get you stirred up. Maybe it would be helpful for those of you that, since land use and economic development, job creation are inexorably connected, it would be helpful to have the county exec give a brief explanation of Parisi. Do you want to do that, or not? Sorry about that. Just we have one of the commissioners here, Zach Brannon is here. Maybe we could ask him to stand up and give a.
Yeah, let's have Zach give a. Hi, Zach.
Right,
I didn't even see you over there. All right. Really, like I said, I'm really trying to get some input from the folks here. From specific to Parisi to general to what's missing. What do you wish was out there when you're looking to expand your company, or if you're a local economic development professional, when you're looking at trying to get someone to bring their startup here, et cetera, that kind of thing. What, this is wish list time. What do you want to see from an entity, or is there no need? I guess we should really cover all ends of the spectrum. Is there a need for the county to be involved in economic development?
Okay, that did it. We now have a couple of volunteers. This gentleman back here, would you stand up and just introduce yourself?
My name is Rod Holden. I actually am wearing two hats here today, so I'm going to try to work both of them.
All right.
I'm a volunteer director for the Dane County Credit Union, of which obviously Joe knows well of. We started right in that building, Joe, as a Christmas club account. So I serve as that volunteer membership. I'm also here as the vice president of sales for a small company in Madison that tries to buy for business from the county to the county. So I'm going to try to work both ends of this if I can. First of all, the average age of our members is now 47 at our credit union, and that's pretty ominous to us because that tells us that our membership is not the newest employees at any level within the county. So we look at that very carefully to say that they're aging out, and that just tells me as a board member that it's tough for us to expand our credit union in terms of infrastructure and employee base when I can actually not see growth in our membership in terms of younger people. And that's not about credit unions or banks, it's just about the economic situation, I think. And then from a vendor relationship, over the course of many years that I've worked at for Dane County as a vendor, they've always had a wonderful feeling that even if the state of Wisconsin has a contract for certain supplies or services, if they could get it locally and it matched the service level agreements, pricing, and contract terms and conditions, they weighed heavily towards doing business locally. Joe, over the last decade, I've not seen that do anything but go the other direction. I've worked with DOA for 30 years, through many different governors, and I can just tell you that it is not a positive local vendor attitude that we get. And that directly affects my bottom line, my ability to hire. We recently were awarded the contract for the city of Madison from that existing large vendor out in New York. They gave it to us because not only did we save them thousands of dollars a month, we did a better job of billing and service and support, and we hired 3 new people as a result. So I would ask that you might take a look at that as well.
Great, thanks for those comments. I'm trying to read your name tag here.
Eric Paulson.
Eric, okay, Eric.
So I'll take maybe...
Just wait 1 second till she brings the mic. Eric, thank you.
Hey, Joe, I'll take maybe a slightly contrarian view here. What's the point of the county getting involved here? The county's not traditionally been an actor in this. In other areas, in other parts of the state or in other regions of the country where there's a county and state government and there's all these other actors, the county isn't always a big actor in the economic development scene. In Madison, or in this area, we've got all the municipal economic development departments. We've got Thrive, which goes slightly bigger. We've got the state of Wisconsin, their economic development work, which just because of geography is disproportionately focused on Dane County and opportunities around here. It's easier for people to meet with people in town. We've got UW-Madison, which does a tremendous amount of economic development work along with WARF and providing these sorts of resources. If you can't provide, I think this will be my statement, if you can't provide a solid and articulate reason why should the county be involved here, don't do it. There are enough of these organizations. I mean, this is 60 man-hours of work we're stopping by to see, well, what's this county thing going to be? If it's another organization that doesn't really differentiate itself from anything else, save us the time. Save yourself the time. Focus instead on a county exec where you start building coalitions, but you don't necessarily use. It's not an organization that people go to. Use the soft power of your office to start bringing people together and making some connections that maybe aren't happening. But if there's not a reason, let's not do it. And if you come at the end of these sessions and you can't point to a good reason that says, here's what my economic development department is going to do that's different and unique, let's not bother.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a registration from Zach Brannon, who's the president of the Wisconsin Angel Network. He actually did volunteer to speak, so we're going to have Zach.
I thought this county executive was telling me I had to.
Yeah, well, it was in so many words.
One, I think Eric and I spent the last 8 weeks agreeing with each other, so I guess now today we'll disagree. But I think this is an important effort on your part, and I applaud you for doing it. And it's about time that we started to talk about it. We've, I think, all too often taken for granted the high quality of life we have here, and the fact that we have a strong economy that's been based on the public sector, but we also have to be willing to pivot away from that and transition. And so I have sort of 4 things I would recommend. One is that your new office, or even you, should become the front door for economic development, the aggregator of the efforts, because we have efforts going on in DeForest and Sun Prairie and Madison, you know, and someone's got to bring all that together, because right now, one, they are small efforts and could be combined into a larger effort, and sometimes they're contrary to each other, and I think we want to make sure that it's healthy to have competition, but first and foremost, we want to get people committed to coming to Dane County, knowing that Dane County is a great place to build your business, expand your business, and then we can argue about where you sign the lease or where you buy the piece of land. Exports is an area, and you and I have talked about it before, but traditionally we haven't focused on it in this county, and we underperform almost every other part of the state, and it shouldn't be that way. That what's just going on right here and on this campus, what's going on that we should be encouraging and finding ways to help these companies realize that there are other markets just outside of Wisconsin, outside the United States, and so a concerted effort to talk about exports, and whether that's in collaboration with the federal government or the state government, I think that would be a good use of your office's time. Access to capital, it's the barrier everyone talks about, whether it's opening the barber shop in the south side of Madison, or whether it's opening a biotech, or whether it's getting to that next level for your company, making sure that people have access to capital. And so whether that's, I know there's, the county's got comparatively significant CDBG dollars that's being used for economic development. If some of that could be targeted towards sort of follow-on, or whether, I know it's a tough budget right now, but whether there's resources in the future to talk about what are called sidecar opportunities, so where if you get angels or venture capital companies that are making investments, there's a possibility that as a follow-on or as a sidecar to that investment, the county could also be involved with a loan, a low-interest loan, so that it just leverages that money that's being put in. And then marketing is the last one. So we have these efforts that are going on a local level, CVB, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Thrive, now the WEDC at the state level have all these marketing efforts, and I think to me that's another place where you can become the aggregator, the consolidator, so that we have one cohesive message, so there isn't just multiple messages going out about what's great about Dane County, but somebody's aggregating that. And so in many ways I see you as a collection point, the front door, the one start shop, the place where you start to talk about, and then your office can help to send people in the right direction. Not that you have to do it all, because as Eric said, there are a lot of resources in this area that you should tap into. And the one thing I would leave at the end is the reason to do it is that you're not going to, just in the amount of time you've been in this office, you're not going to tax your way out of the budget problem. You're not going to borrow your way out of the budget problem. You're going to have to grow out of the budget problem. It's going to be a revenue tax-based growth is what's going to be. And I would say that's the argument for Parisi as well, but I didn't come here to talk about Parisi. But I think that's the argument for economic development, is that you need to find a way to grow the tax base, and that's the best way to do it. And so again, I applaud you for doing this, and hopefully what comes out of this is a fruitful effort that allows you to become the front door for economic development in Dane County.
Thanks, Zach.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Okay, we're going to start picking on audience members here who are being shy. How about thoughts about skilled workforce, the importance of skilled workforce, skilled training? The county is very much involved in workforce training and operating some of the programs on behalf of state government that help upgrade the skills of our workers. What are your thoughts about the role the county government might play in that effort, enhanced role, importance of skilled workforce, that sort of thing? Anybody have thoughts? Yes, sir.
It works.
You want to wait till the mic comes? And
Sure. Thanks, Lee.
Frank, just make sure you introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Frank Staniszewski. I'm president of Madison Development Corporation, and I've been involved in economic development longer than I care to admit. Really, this is an observation that I've just had fairly recently, is I'm getting more and more complaints from businesses that they're looking to hire and they're unable to find people. I think some of them are in the kind of more entry-level physical skills like metal bending and so on, although that's pretty technical these days too. And hearing things like, these people are looking to hire farm kids from outside of the county because for some reason they've got an idea that they're going to be better employees, and I don't know what to say when I hear that. I also see in the technology sector, probably more so in the information science, that fairly some entry level, but even on a higher level, businesses are really looking possibly to need to go someplace else because they cannot find the talent that they need now, and they're ready to hire. I remember you used to hear this stuff back when unemployment was 1.2 or 2%, and I thought those days were over. With the unemployment now, it's a luxury that we're not as high as some of the other places in the state, but it's higher than we've seen here in Dane County in a long time. And I cannot believe I'm still hearing these stories. And I don't know, I work in the finance area, and if somebody needs financing, send them to me. But where do we go if people need if some of these businesses need assistance with these recruiting issues? I think there could be a role for the county to at least, I know there's a lot of resources for it, and I know there are a lot of agencies, and I work with the MATC and others, but I think there could be more of an ombudsman role in that to make sure it's done more efficiently.
Starting to get you stirred up a little bit here now, so.
Yeah, look out. No.
Yes.
I'm Janet Johnson from the QTI group. Mark, I'm glad that you asked a question about skilled labor. I think that that's probably one of the greatest challenges we have in our county, but statewide overall. And QTI has a number of branches throughout the state. And this is probably the #1 question I get asked when I'm out and meeting with customers. I think that you play a huge role related to the success or what happens with that particular skilled labor area. I think, though, that the problem and what you need to do is you need to get involved with the schools. And I mean like MATC is great, but I'm talking about the high schools. And I think even more than that, you need to get involved with the parents, because so many parents are telling their kids, go to college, go to college, go to college, which is fantastic, but what does that really mean? And we've got to get back to educating people that working in skilled trades isn't a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. It's not a low-class thing. And there's such a misperception out there about what skilled trades is and what business or career opportunities are around that. And I think it really starts at the dinner table. And it's bigger than just going to MATC. It's bigger than just having the recruiters or the college recruiters go to the high schools. We've got to get to the parents and start having a different conversation with them, and we need to start earlier than later. And there's so many people that are at retirement age in the skilled trades, and we're going to lose so much of that, and we don't have that skill set coming in the backside. So that's a huge gap and something that I think is rather urgent in our community.
Thank you.
Terrific. Anybody else have thoughts, comments on skilled workforce issues and preparing our companies and workers for the next generation of our economic development growth trajectory?
So if I could, Mark. So what I'm hearing from that comment is basically it could potentially be helpful to have an entity, part of those whose duties include, at least in part, coordinating between the workforce, business, and education institutions. Am I hearing that that's just not
It's not working
right now?
It's not working as well as it has to.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I would even go, and I think it's a great point, I would even go one step further into areas that you traditionally.
Hang on 1 second. She's bringing the mic around.
I saw Frank without a mic.
I have a deeper voice.
Yeah.
One of the other, I think it's great, I would go even further into one of the areas that county's traditionally been involved in, which is the workforce development side. And I mean all the way from people that are coming off of W-2 and are really looking for that first job and that skill set, and that we're looking at the job center and how that interacts with businesses in Dane County. I think has been an important tie-in for you for what you've traditionally done at the county level, but also how you can promote economic development and the workforce development. Because when you talk to the trades and you talk to some of the skill sets that were referred to by the previous speakers, you don't just populate that area. You don't just sort of walk in and become a CNC machinist or a welder. There's an apprenticeship and a pre-apprenticeship program, and so focused on that side of workforce development. So getting the people that are in our safety net or are about to fall into our safety net access to those opportunities would be a great economic development opportunity for the county as well.
How big of a problem is this, or an issue is this? Does anyone else want to wait?
We have a questioner right here. Raise your hand. There you go.
Danica.
Hi, my name is Danica. I'm with the Workforce Development Board of South Central Wisconsin. And my role with the workforce is I'm the Director of Field Operations, which it's a weird title for what I actually do, but the way that we're working at the board, things are kind of moving in a slightly different direction, and we're focusing a lot more on business engagements, because for so long it was all very customer based and getting a certain person trained, going in and finding one person a job. And now it's more focused on meeting with business, talking with business owners in different industries, and finding out where the gaps are and how we need to train larger groups of people for those more specific jobs. And as we travel around our region, which is 6 counties, we do get one of the biggest comments we get is, we're hiring, we cannot find anyone. Or we're hiring, 300 people applied, we gave 3 of them an interview. So it is a huge problem in manufacturing, in healthcare, in industries all across everything that we deal with at the board. And I think that if you have a chance to meet with Pat Schramm, I know you're familiar with her, she is working on a lot of really interesting new ideas, working with high schools and getting certain youth educated in certain industries, those kids that aren't excelling in certain areas of high school, and sort of getting them some technical school credits to get them more trained to take some of these jobs. We're really working on engaging more with business to help combat some of these issues, to figure out how we can better train the people that we have in our system that are unemployed, and figure out how we can make those employment connections. Because it is a problem, because we do have a lot of folks who are unemployed, and we do a lot of jobs that are open, but there's a huge disconnect in getting those people fit in.
Yes. Harry Phil.
I go a little bit differently. I am now working on the south side of Madison as a receiver. And I am seeing a tremendous amount of kids that are not in school. They're not graduating. I've gotten involved with the Urban League now. And when we're talking about kids who are encouraged to go to college, I'm not worried about those kids. They're going to go to college, they're going to go to MATC. I'm also on the foundation board for MATC. But if the county is going to step in anywhere, I think it's time that we stepped in the schools and said, look, we need some training within the school systems. We need to allow some of our people who are skilled to come in and help teach these kids, to maybe get them excited about different areas other than dropping out or the straight college or whatever it happens to be. You know, we're losing, well, what have we got? Half of the black kids in Madison are dropping out between 9th grade and graduating. I mean, that's just appalling. And so I don't know if the county can help in any way on that, but those are potential workers and not potential criminals if we get them going the right way. I don't have the answer for that, but when we're talking about workforce, I'd rather not be hiring more police officers and jailers if we could get some of these kids working. And maybe it's like they're doing in Florida, and you can get a 1-year certificate to teach. And a professional or a tradesman can come in then and teach these kids. Florida's done a tremendous turnaround, and they were one of the worst states in the nation for their education. Now they're number 5. And part of that is just really getting these kids and getting their parents. I don't know whoever said the parents. These teachers down there are required to go visit every family that is going to be in their class the next year and get them involved. Now, I know that isn't something you can force or anything, but I would think that you would have a lot of influence on how we can get some of these things turned around. And I watch these kids, and they're young kids. They're walking around every day. They've got nothing to do, and they're doing nothing but getting in trouble. And it's not just South Madison, it's all over. But we need to get some push on there and really get these people in the workforce. And some of them are very bright. They just haven't connected.
Thank you. If I could just quickly, the person with the mic is Olivia Perry. She's our Dane County's economic development specialist. And I should be clear, when I talk about county government evolving and wanting to have one centralized location for economic development, it's not that Dane County hasn't been involved in economic development efforts. It's kind of grown organically over the years, and we feel like it's come to a place where it's time to pull all of the various efforts that are going on throughout Dane County government together and utilize them the best. Olivia's been working a lot with institutional foods and agriculture, which, as you know, is over a $3 billion industry in Dane County. So I just wanted to clarify that because I don't know how clear I was about that in the beginning. Thank you.
Mary, you mentioned you're a receiver.
Yeah, Genesis Enterprise Center.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And would you envision a program where, for instance, an economic development specialist for the county would go into the schools and actually interview kids to find out where their interests were?
No, mine was totally off topic, I realize
Okay.
that.
All right. I'm just trying to...
I'm just saying that you as county exec could have a great influence on some of the things that are stopped at the door in our school systems because they're not open to something different and just helping the kids. I think it's Fresh Start. They won't give high school credits to Fresh Start. Come on, that's ridiculous. These kids are learning skills. So I get involved in all of that kind of underlying thing, and I just think if the county were up front and you were up front, you have the influence to say we need to look at some of these things a little bit differently, and we can't lose these kids because these kids could be very skilled, good workers. They're not school oriented. They're hands-on. They're get the job done kind of orientation, and like in Fresh Start, they teach these kids that you need math. This is why you need math. This is why you need this. So I think we have to start thinking and working with some of those folks that we have out there. Again, a little off topic, but Clean Care is just a fine example of what can be done in some of the things they're doing.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think you had a question.
I was going to actually almost follow up. I'm Dorothy Krause. I'm a recently elected alder in Fitchburg, in the area that surrounds Allied Drive. And I would like to speak beyond the children that have those needs. There's also many, many people in the area who live in chronic poverty that I would like to find ways to help out of their situations. People don't want to continue just supporting them, nor do I. I would like to find ways, and I would ask employers to consider helping find ways to create jobs for that set of people so that we can kind of change the culture of chronic poverty. And I'm not certain how the county would be involved in that, but I'd certainly love to see it.
Great. Any other thoughts on the skilled workforce issues or anything associated with that? How about issues related to land use, other than carp seed? We won't bring up carp seed anymore. Land use or issues around job creation, economic development as it relates to site locations and things like that. Is that something on anybody's mind here in the audience? Yes, Mary?
I'll open my big mouth again. By the way, I work for Parktown Development Corp. So we do land development, and I'm also in management and real estate. Those of us who are trying to develop have a constant fear of what the county is going to do next. Whether it's wetlands, whether it's the 1,000 feet from a river, whatever you're going to do. I mean, somewhere along the way, we've got to be able to not be developing in fear of what's going to happen next. Who's going to bring up some ridiculous rule, or, you know, that's something that we're all, I mean, we get together, we get it shot down, hopefully, but we shouldn't have to be wasting our time on that kind of thing.
Okay, any other thoughts? Just ready to be.
Oh, no, I was just saying.
Okay. Yes,
I guess.
wait till we get the mic over. Olivia's getting a workout today, running back and forth.
Speaking from other experiences I've had, because I live in rural Dane County and sit on like an area planning group that's basically tied to school systems, I would say something that has to be looked at in depth is how state rules affect our tax structure. When you're dealing with the type of development that we're dealing with, and I often look at Dane County as like a 21st century economy surrounded by a large chunk of Wisconsin, which operates on really different rules. And I see a lot of that clashing at the state level. But there's a whole series of formulas. And one of the things that we saw in our local school district was a slowing on rapid development of housing, because the housing wasn't paying for itself in terms of the school costs. And it wasn't that the school costs were necessarily incredibly higher than they necessarily need to be. It's the fact that if you know much about the school tax formula, it's a reverse weighting system. The more value you have per kid, the less you get from the state. And when you basically put those two things together, depending on how that works, you end up with a situation where your property tax is raised, and then you basically have all sorts of problems. If you look at the child care area that I work in, currently the state funding formula shorts anybody who touches a state kid by anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 in Dane County. You go outside Dane County, it's $1,000, maybe even less. In some sections it works out perfectly well. We have eligibility formulas that basically skew for one eligibility formula in a state that ranges currently from a low of $15,000 or $16,000 to support a family of two to a high of about $36,000 or $38,000. We're up near the upper end. And so we have a whole bunch of things that are happening that I think that we're basically backfilling. We have to backfill with local property tax revenue. And if we start looking at some of these things, then strategically thinking, but what tends to happen is that Dane County doesn't work as, I think, a unified whole. It works basically as a whole group of interest groups. And we basically then put in financial disincentives, I think, in many cases for the type of development that we need. So I would say that'd be one thing to look at. In Chicago, there were some very interesting models when I was there 20 years ago. And I have yet to see, I think, I don't know if we have a big enough economy to make it work in terms of the industrial skills area, where we literally created or looked at clusters of industry, looked at their basic manpower needs and funneled it into training programs. And they did a lot of that on the northwest side, mainly because they had a whole series of industrial related areas, I mean, tool and die and other types of stuff, where they basically had nobody coming into the field anymore, and they needed to develop a workforce. But I think one of the themes I hear from a number of people here is that what we're looking at, I think, is more the power, to the extent that the exec and the county board has power, of people to convene people to force change or to suggest or really push change, as opposed to necessarily developing a series of additional county services. But I think if you really need to start looking at some of these public policy areas, because we tend to get continually screwed, and then if they cut us further, then they're screwing us further. And I think that's going to depend on what those formulas are. But there are some real disincentives in some of the formulas that are set up 15, 20 years ago to actually making it work here in terms of keeping a tax burden down low enough that you can run business as well.
Other thoughts?
Any specific examples from people who perhaps own a business, and you look at your business plan, and obviously what you need to succeed and expand is demand for your product, but is there anything else when you look at what's holding you back, what's giving you the most trouble? Is there anything like that an entity that Dane County runs or coordinates or could be involved in could help you out with? So I'm hearing a lot of the coordination, particularly between the employers, the employees, the higher education, and the public schools, and secondary schools, basically, as one of the big
Yeah.
kind of common themes that we're hearing.
Bob?
Thanks, Olivia. Bob Swartz with the Madison Community Foundation. There's two more theme-based things I'd like to bring up. One is along the lines of predictability, as Mary talked about it. I think when Mark's talking about land use, and when we look at it in terms of where we can invest in communities, we're looking at things like bike trails and libraries and things along those lines. And without a very predictable approach to development, whether it's real estate development or whatnot, these things take years and years, sometimes decades, to really build momentum behind. And you look at things like the bike trail on Monroe Street and the restaurant that I believe was going to go in there, that would be a bike-specific restaurant. People have to be able to anticipate what's going to happen long-term to really think about, what sort of business model is going to work with those assets that we're putting in place. So I just wanted to back up what you were saying about
You said it so much better.
about predictability. I'd also think that when you look at entities like Thrive and their identification of key growth sectors, such as the bike, North American Bike Capital and things along those lines, that it's one thing to put that out there and to have this institution saying that this is a great opportunity for economic development. It's another thing for the counties to get behind it and to say, yep, we agree. We're going to pass a resolution that says we think Dane County's economic development future partly rests on healthcare and North American biking capital, so that businesses outside of Dane County are looking at that, or outside of the Thrive region, all 8 counties are saying, okay, it's not just Thrive saying that. We've now got the county committed, and they're serious about it. Which sort of leads into my other comment, which is really hoping that as you develop this entity, it'll be more based on asset-based opportunities versus needs-based opportunities. I could go down, I was making a list of different asset-based opportunities, everything from our lakes. I happen to sit on the Greater Madison Convention and Visitors Bureau Board. What's the number one thing visitors want is access to our lakes. Right now, with the condition of the lakes, what's the one thing we want to prevent them access to? Is getting to our lakes and saying, oh, the lakes are terrible. So I think looking at the assets that we already have, whether it be the lakes or the collaborations occurring between the 28 libraries in Dane County, all the senior centers in Dane County, learning from each other about programming. Even something as simple as the senior centers putting together a calendar so that seniors can see what the programs are at each of the senior centers, and in some cases there might be transportation issues, but in other cases seniors are able to go to other centers that are doing the type of programming that maybe their closest senior center isn't doing. And so there are a lot of these sort of asset-based opportunities that I hope we'll take a look at it and explore. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Other ideas? Regulation. We've heard a little bit of that today, on specifically related to land use. We hear a lot from people that regulation is onerous and therefore economic development is stifled because of complex regulation. Does anybody have any examples of sort of county regulation that would stifle the expansion or development of jobs in their company or in their organization that we could talk about? Is that an issue that...
We can't talk about Parisi though.
Well, feel free.
You can talk about it. I just, like I said, I'm here to listen. I'm not here to get into necessarily a deep discussion about Parisi right now. I'm completely open to hearing your opinions about it, about where it should go or shouldn't go, or what it should be doing. So I by no means wanted to give the impression that I don't want to hear about it. If you believe that's an important piece of the economic development puzzle in Dane County, please feel free to share.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat that drum too soundly. I think you understand that it has been frustrating in the past, and I think your direction is good in that there may be some changes on the horizon. I think what you're hearing from the group overall is that maybe the most important role that the county can play is rather than try and get involved legislatively and programmatically, maybe the county has an opportunity here to be a facilitator to bring all of the entities together so that they can discuss solutions. If we could get the high schools and the technical colleges and the work training groups in the same room and say, what are the problems and what are the opportunities, I think without any more legislation, without any more units of government, without any more involvement, we'd come up with some amazing solutions. I think we could do that on land use as well. And that's sort of where I started, is saying, you know, we've got city planners in every community in this region who have, you know, gone through the comprehensive planning process for their communities. I think bringing them all together and saying, how do we fit this individual planning into a dome that serves Dane County is a solution that doesn't require a program, doesn't require staffing, doesn't require new legislation, but requires leadership. And I think that's what your office has an opportunity to bring to the table, is the leadership to get everybody talking about solutions without mandating or trying systemic change.
Thank you.
Good, that's helpful. We had a little bit on taxes. The extent to which taxes are a barrier for growth and economic development might be helpful. Some input from this group. I'm trying to think of a vast array of issues that affect businesses and their decisions to locate, expand, grow. We hear a lot about skilled workforce, skilled training. Yes, sir, Ron?
It's less about taxes than it is, I think, about revenue opportunity. In other words, if we want to grow our business and attract employees that want to live in Dane County, which is a pretty easy sell, really, it's a beautiful county, we need to have revenue opportunities. The common theme I'll share is that if I go to Madison Area Technical College as a potential vendor and they outsource their contracts outside of vendors to Dane County, I can't create the jobs. There's no excuse if I can qualify for that work. The excuses I hear is, there's a lot of them, but the point of the matter is, if you could just contain that bleed, that revenue bleed, based on the simple fact that we have local vendors that can support that contract, the service level agreements, the pricing structure, contract terms, all of that, and keep the money here, we're going to be fine. It's when we allow it to bleed out that I can't talk about growth. So that's really my common theme here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's good.
Mark, can I ask you a question? How many of the buildings in this facility were design build versus contract state?
All of these buildings are built under a design build kind of methodology. This research park is a nonprofit real estate development corporation. And so we don't operate under the state's guidelines, DOA guidelines for the process of selecting architects, selecting contractors, and that sort of thing. So we base our construction decisions based on a sense for the need for the type of infrastructure that we have to offer here in the research park. Right now we have 37 buildings out here in the park, 1.8 million square feet under roof. About half of that is wet labs. You see those stacks sticking up. That's what a wet lab, that's what the outside of a wet lab looks like when there's stacks sticking up on top of the building. And about 126 companies employing 3,600 people here in the research park. And as I mentioned to the county exec as we kicked off this meeting, average salary of employees here in the park is about $64,000 per year, which is pretty good. Not only when you compare it to the per capita income of the state, but also even Dane County. Mm-hmm. And so aspiring to these kinds of jobs, whether they're a PhD working in a research lab or a 2-year graduate of the MATC lab tech program, making $35,000 or $40,000 a year out here running a lab are pretty nice jobs with the kinds of opportunities that they have. It's kind of a long answer to your short question, so.
You asked, that's what we need.
More research parks. I was going to ask about cultural opportunities for companies. We found here in the park that many of our young workers are interested in cultural diversity in the community. They don't just go to Mallard's games, they are interested in the opera, they're interested in museums, they're interested in a broad array of cultural offerings in a community like this. And I wondered if there's any thoughts, not that this particular job would expand sort of knowledge of the arts, but I think it's one of the things that's interesting, or it's been interesting for me out here in the research park, is the level at which we have become sensitized to the importance of broad cultural offerings in the community as a basis for people wanting to come here, stay here, grow their companies here, employ their colleagues here, and that sort of thing. Having opera in the park across the street this weekend, which I think there were 12 or 13,000 people there just across the street. So the research park has been a big supporter of the arts, and because of that linkage between science and the arts, we think that's fairly important. And I wonder if that's shared with people here in the audience. Eric, you want to wait for the mic?
Yeah, looking. There we are. I'll just give you an anecdote, not that that kind of just supports that. So I'm finishing up my PhD at UW-Madison. For a couple of years I chaired the graduate student recruiting weekend.
Okay.
And I will tell you absolutely that so the best recruiting tool we had was the quality of our faculty at the computer science department. The second best recruiting tool that we had was the Madison Platinum Bike Report. Absolutely, I sealed the deal probably more with that than any single thing in here. I could tell people Madison's going to get a platinum bike rating, you should come to graduate school here. And that worked. Mm-hmm. And I think that recruiting graduate students is probably a pretty good proxy for recruiting new young workers. And so more things like that, they really do work, the quality of life. Well, there's just one more data point for you.
Broadly defined. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can address that on a personal
to
level.
introduce yourself too?
Oh, I'm Aaron Hager. I'm with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, but I guess the answer to this question is a bit of an aside. So before I moved back to Madison in December, I was on a nationwide job search, and I could have gone anywhere based on what I do, assuming there was a position open. And with the job I have, because of where it is, it was, it's a great job, but it was most attractive because of the location. I did my undergraduate work here. I lived in other parts of the country. I was in Washington State. I was in Minneapolis. And the opportunity to come back to Madison was great. So I think in terms of a driver of economic development, you don't, I think it takes a bit of vigilance to maintain the quality of life here, but I think it's a key driver for future economic activities and opportunities. So, yeah, maintain.
Can I ask Aaron? Is it Aaron?
Yeah.
Could I ask you, in your position, and I know it's relatively new, so I don't know if you have have your arms wrapped around this yet. Do you have any thoughts on how a county entity could be useful with what you're doing at the state level? So is there do you see a potential benefit in having one point person, one point entity you can reach out to at the beginning of a process, be it an expansion, keeping a business here, or bringing a new business? Do you have any thoughts on how that relationship could potentially work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I thought Zach's comments were good in terms of how to integrate overall. I think I don't, I guess, have a direct answer to that question just yet, because I focus more on specifically on early stage technology businesses throughout the state. So in terms of a county presence, yes, it would be good. However, so much of what we have is focused within Madison city limits. We have our resources that are involved. We have Frank and his resources that are involved. So I don't know that a county level would necessarily be critical to that piece. However, you know, there are other perspectives on a more regional basis that would probably be able to better direct that. The one thing I think that would be interesting is really examining what people are doing or what different organizations are doing and really trying to fill the gaps. I think a lot of the comments have been good on looking at what's been done in terms of planning and seeing where the overlaps are, seeing where the holes are, and then seeing what the county has in terms of a framework and how to best plug those holes. That's, I guess, my initial take on this.
Thank you. Zach.
Yes, Zach.
If I could just follow up with Aaron, well, I think one thing I would encourage you to do is reach out to Jim Cruiser in Kenosha. I mean, I know you served together when Semba was such a big natural opportunity for you. But if you look what Kenosha is doing, and partly because they have to, right? They have Illinois on their heels all the time, but they're winning that battle, that fight, and how they organize their economic development efforts with the private sector through what they call CABA, the Kenosha Area Business Alliance. And two of the things I think sort of where they're aggregators that make sense. One, they aggregate information on incentives. So they know what the local incentives are, what banks you could talk to, what the federal and state incentives are, and plug into WDC or to the EDA or to the SBA. And the other is they keep track of where the land is, you know, where the buildings are, where there's availability of vacant lots. And so it's a one-stop shop for economic development. So, you know, one way is to have a front door that helps businesses. The other is to have the front door that helps economic development entities like WDC. So when they're saying, okay, we've got a business from China or Minnesota that wants to locate, and when you're looking for 30,000 square feet, what do you have? But there's a place for that. Somebody's aggregated that information and kept track of it for them. And that's what I mean when I talk about that front door. And I think that would be a great way to plug in WDC.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that would be good. Any other thoughts on any of the other issues that we've talked about? We've mentioned financing of early stage startup companies, and capital is always an issue for companies. In light of the budget difficulties that all governments have, does anyone think that county government ought to step more deeply into financial assistance for early stage startup companies? I'm rolling grenades across the floor here. You know. Yes, Ron?
The bankers I talk to say there's plenty of money to lend. They have too much money.
Could you repeat that for the mic?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I work with the community bankers of Wisconsin, have a chance to interact with a variety of lenders in our county, and there's money to lend. That is not the issue. The issue in borrowing money for businesses is where are you going to grow your business? What are you going to do? How is this going to sustain? It's not about lending money, it's sustainable revenue streams so that it's viable for them long term. That's what the bankers have been telling me as I approach them to grow our business. As we approach companies to merge or to expand, it's not about availability of money, it's just where are you going to grow? How are you going to do this?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe a discussion about some of the soft assets that need to be sort of interjected into the business development system and process. Things like helping companies with business planning, writing a business plan, with personnel systems. How do we design a HR system if we've never done that before? Strategic planning for a brand new business. Those kinds of what I call soft skills or soft assets that we might help bring into a sort of an office like this, where you could either do referrals or have people that have the skill set to provide people with advice on business planning and that kind of thing. We'll get to Mary, but somebody else, Aaron first, then Mary.
Yeah, I just had to address the early stage financing issue since that's what I do all day.
Okay.
With due respect, the banking situation for early stage companies is quite a bit different than established businesses. These are typically companies without a revenue stream, and if you have bankers who are willing to lend to them, by all means, put them in contact with me because I have a whole host of clients who would love some extra money. And in terms of where the county can go with that, I don't want to dictate what the county does with its finances. And that's a really large issue on how to do that. Obviously, there are legislation at the state to try to get an additional $400 million in venture capital. So that's the scale that we're dealing with in terms of potential need. It's just a very large issue, and if you're willing to entertain those conversations, you know, there's an awful lot to be had there. So it's probably worth the whole week of your time just trying to figure out the nuances of that.
Mary Feld, she's, I struck a nerve, I think. Part of my job, right?
That's right.
Yeah, you did a good job with that.
Yeah, good.
I would hate to see the county doing something like that. I think the county needs to have a list of people. There are a lot of them that do that.
You're talking about business planning and
Business planning and
personnel related.
Oh, personnel, all of that. I mean, we have a wealth of that around, and some of it's even free. For the county to get into that, I think would just be ridiculous. I think having a list of those would be wonderful. So somebody calls up and say, where can I get information on that? And you can give them a list of the 25 groups that already do that, and maybe even have their fee structures, and there are several that are free. Or you can send them to Genesis, and I do that for them. Just had to get a plug in there, you know.
Okay, Neil, wait till the mic
Sure.
comes.
Well, thanks. I think I know most of you. Neil Lerner, I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center. We'd certainly welcome the county referring people to us, and we provide free assistance. We don't write business plans for people. We do help people organize their operations. But we work with people as mentors, and so does SCORE, sitting next to me, Bill Arthur. But also, we refer a lot of people, as Mary said, to the private sector. We're a big supporter of the private sector. We understand that long-term, companies live in the private sector, they don't live in the public sector. And so part of our goal is to get them started, to get them on the right path, have them do a good plan, whether it be in the initial stages of the business plan, or if they're an existing company that's just starting to grow and need operational, organizational help. But then, you know, when they have the financial capacity, they need to go out to the private sector and use those services. So I think we do both, and we would certainly welcome the county participating and sending more people our way.
Great. How about Bill? Bill, do you want to?
Ditto.
Ditto?
As Neil said, we do this very similar kind of thing at SCORE, and we're happy to do that, and by all means, send folks our way.
So when I sort of raised this issue, I wasn't suggesting that we hire employees at the county or anything like that to form the basis of this role, but I think this idea of having referrals or an inventory of assets in the community, which is very important, because a lot of times people simply don't have those kinds of connections and relationships. And so whether it's a website with a list of vendors, perhaps, that kind of thing, or people in the office that would have the referral capacity when someone calls up and says, I want to start a business, I need a business plan, my lender requires that I have a business plan, where do I go? This would be available. Or we could send them to you folks, Neil, or Bill. Yes,
The
Ken?
county had developed in the past an economic development guide that was actually pretty good. You talk about website, and it was a paper document, or it became a PDF. Those resources are really useful, but the idea of creating a maintained, current, updated document or website would be really beneficial, and you've already got the bones for that. It is interesting in the state of Wisconsin, and I do a lot of aggregation of different economic development resources, and there's a guy, one individual at DATCAP that put together a document called Got Moolah. If you have a business interest in the state of Wisconsin and you're not reading Got Moolah, which is this one individual's collection of everything economic development in the state of Wisconsin. I don't know why the state doesn't do that. I don't know why the county doesn't do that. I am extremely grateful that the guy at DATCAP does it, and I link to it. But you know, to have a comprehensive source, and actually I thought the document that I think Olivia had a lot to do with it, the Dane County Economic Development Guide, was very good, but it became rapidly outdated.
Great.
Those
Good idea.
those are really valuable resources.
Gottmula, so it's gottmula.com or something like that?
No, it's a guy at DATCAP. I mean,
Oh,
pardon?
Carl Rainey.
Carl Rainey puts it together, yeah, and I mean, I don't want to plug, but WisconsinDevelopment.com tools at the bottom of and it's Gottmula.
interesting. Never heard of that one before.
Just a question for you, Mark, because I sort of know somewhat about the biotech, and I'm sort of interested. There was not much discussion today about biotech. There's a lot of discussion about general economic development, but how does the cuts that are happening, the changes to employees at the UW research area, affect the overall long-term health of the industry? I mean, to what extent does what's happening in biotech here is somewhat tied to what's happening in biotech there? Because my perception is that, one, we've taken, if the research industry is 1.1 billion, I don't know how much of that is at UW-Madison, but let's say it's 800 million, and we're taking 10%, 8% out of that, which is first off an economic kick to the local level because those people aren't spending it locally. Two, these are the people who are the entrepreneurs. They basically raise that money from the federal government or other types of grants. They've done that type of development. And many of them have bypassed jobs in the private sector over time in order to continue working at the UW, and they wake up and 8 to 10% of their income is done. If you don't think those people are talking to everybody in their field in the country about their experiences, you're incredibly naive. And so it seems to me you're going to be facing a couple of interesting challenges. One is, over time, possibly getting people into various types of positions at the UW research, especially if you aren't going to be seeing any type of increases in salaries to offset basically those costs. And I don't know how those things interrelate, but I mean, like, it seems to me that if we're looking at this not from a local development, but if you're really looking at biotech, you're looking at a national or international competition structure. You know, the people in my township who I know who have kids who have high degrees in engineering or sciences, 5 out of the 7 are not working in the United States right now. And so, you know, I'm just sort of curious if anyone's done much thinking on that, because having some contact with those people who are working in those research labs and at various levels, especially that whole middle level that you really need to do that type of work, I'm not hearing a lot of positive things about growth economic development or staying in Madison or working here. So, and that message is going out on the larger scale nationally. So.
Yeah. George, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards, because I have some thoughts about that, and it's not as dire as you kind of depicted, but we want to try and keep this on county government and what the county executive can do, and they can do a lot in county government, but they don't have any control over the university and the university's research budgets and that sort of thing. And my guess is that we'll see continued sustained growth in university-related, research-related economic development activities, notwithstanding what's going on with university's budget and that sort of thing, because it's sort of outside of much of that. But I'll talk to you about that afterwards. We're trying to do is focus in on what County Executive Parisi and county supervisors and county government can do to be helpful in economic development and job creation, and get your ideas and thoughts about that. And I realize some of these kind of cross different areas of subject, but this is your opportunity to talk to the county executive about issues that have been on your mind for a long time. You don't get these opportunities all the time. Not that he's not easy to talk to, but for him to sit here for 2 hours and listen to your thoughts is, I think, an important commitment to economic development and job creation in this county. So, Ron, why don't we ask somebody who's not had a chance to weigh in here yet, and we'll try and make sure everybody gets a chance at the end. So if you'd introduce yourself. And
I'm Rob Helm. I'm a commercial real estate broker here in Dane County. I'm a member of the board of the Realtors Association of South Central Wisconsin. And I guess, you know, what I hear here today is a lot of people talking about new ideas, things we could do. And, you know, the notion that I came here with is how we're still struggling with something that happened 3 years ago, which is a financial crisis, which led to a recession, job loss, struggling housing sector. And the big positive that I see here today is that we're going to talk about economic development. It seems like there's a disconnect here, you know? And I think this is very good to change the messaging from the county executive's office and say we're going to be involved in economic development. We're going to help foster that. There's some positive things happening that have happened in the last year. We've had some positive job growth in Dane County, which we haven't had for several years. That's a big deal. That's going to help my industry. It's going to help the housing industry. So I think the main message I have is to try to change the messaging and the discussion that we hear from the county government. You know, we're positive. We're going to be on the side of economic development.
Great. Ron, did you have a, wait till the mic gets back there.
I only get to see Joe once, so I get to throw it all at you. I live in your former district in the township of Dunn. Very rural, very proud of that. The town of Dunn has terrific recreation. We have the lakes, of course. We have hiking, biking. We also have a snowmobile club that will be 42 years old this year. And we're the only snowmobile club that the state of Wisconsin does not fund. Joel, we've talked about this. There'll be a bridge dedication, Joel, which I'm sure you'll be invited to, which the Stoughton Snowmobile Club will be installing a bridge, or they'll be there for the ceremony. This bridge is in a swamp between Highway N and another County Trunk B. The bridge was $50,000. It was paid for completely by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. We have asked for $3,500 to help us fund our trail system for the last 40+ years and have still received $0. So a few less lock washers on that bridge and we'd be all right and get our funding. So when that comes up, well, how does this affect economic development? There's a small business there called Quam's Motorsports. There's a small gas station. Those are all affected by our ability to put that trail in. Also, Joe, from southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois, they use our trail system to connect to the rest of the corridors throughout the state and the county. And so when this subject comes up again, I hope now that you're in this position, you might be able to say, wait a minute, there's got to be money available for this 42-year-old organization that's been volunteering their time. So that was my last chance.
We asked for it, didn't we? Other thoughts? Other thoughts from biotech leaders or small business leaders or that kind of thing with respect to issues that you'd like to see the county deal with? One of the things I wanted to raise is whether or not you felt the county had a role in reaching out to businesses across the county, visiting those businesses, urging those businesses to grow, to expand, sort of a ambassador role where the county exec would perform this sort of visitation role. And also, I know Zach and I have worked on a rapid response team kind of approach when you hear about Stoughton trailers having troubles and maybe, or that's just an example, but leaving the county as an example, would you mobilize a group of business people led by the county exec to go out and find out what it would take to retain a business like that in Dane County, so that there's a quick response by government when something comes up along those lines? Just an idea. And a second thought as to whether or not the county has a role in outreach and education, helping small businesses with sort of educational initiatives, putting on seminars, small gatherings for people, bringing in experts to help sort of gather folks around a particular subject matter or idea with respect to economic development and job growth regionally around the county and the various communities. So these are thoughts that I'm sort of throwing out to get your reaction and response. Zach Brandon.
So on that last point, one of the things, Joe, I think that are important are in your relationship with tech transfer at the UW. And so 3 acronyms I think are important for the county executive to start to reach out to are WARF, OCR, the Office of Corporate Relations, and URP, the University Research Park. Because, and Jen Post-Tyler is here from Thrive. Thrive did a report and talked about how we are underperforming our peer cities on tech transfer. So we get more money in federal research dollars than anyone else in the country, or almost anyone else in the country. But our peer cities that we should be compared to are outperforming us when it comes to job growth and new business creation. And I don't know the answer there, and I'm not sure if anybody in this room has the answer. But I think for you to take that leadership role, to talk to WARF and URP and OCR and say, okay, we know we have a disconnect. No one has come up with the answer, but let's start working together on what the collaboration is to figure out that answer, because we're leaving money on the table, because those ideas are getting commercialized somewhere. It's just happening outside of Dane County, and you should do everything you can, we should do everything we can to keep that commercialization in our home soil. And so I think if you talk about how you interact with the UW and how you interact with the small startups, I think that's a great place for you to start and to spearhead that.
Great, thank you.
Just by way of explanation, the provost at UW-Madison has created a Discovery to Jobs initiative, which he's working on, and perhaps linking the county exec into that effort. The goal of that initiative is designed to pull technology out of the university and mobilize more in the way of job creation and economic development around technologies that are discovered at the university. So for our local public policy makers like the county exec, this would be a place for them to kind of intersect into that world. How about the idea of an educational role for the county, putting on small seminars, providing assistance to people, aspiring business people around a region, around the county, that might focus specifically on individual topics, doing a business plan, that kind of thing. Anybody have thoughts about that? Yes. Want to wait till the mic comes over? And
I think I really need to go along with what seems almost a consensus of the group, is that you guys should be coordinating. There are so many people already doing that. You can host those kind of events. But I don't think you probably want to have staff or whatever that would be doing it, because you're just reinventing the wheel. So go ahead and contract with people that are doing it or whatever to host those things.
let me ask you this, not to be argumentative, but do those kinds of events take place in places like the rural parts of Dane County, the small communities of Dane County? Is there an outreach into the smaller communities to help small businesses across? I mean, I know those kinds of events. We have them here. Neil puts them on in this room. So they occur in Madison clearly, but I wonder about the broadly defined county and the small communities of this county. Yeah, Neil.
Well, you know, I think that's probably not enough, but probably a lot of the smaller chambers are doing that.
Okay.
You know, when you look at it, you know, whether it's the Stoughton Chamber or the Oregon Chamber, you know, part of their job is to provide value added to their members, and a lot of their members are smaller businesses, and so we get calls lots of times to go out and we're just one of many people that they contact. You know, so they'll contact, if it's about insurance and risks, you know, they'll contact a local insurance agent that probably is a member of their chamber to give a talk at a lunch for the chamber. I get contacted pretty frequently to go out and talk about whether it's just what we do and what we can provide to people, as well as business planning or marketing. And I think that that's a pretty good system in that it's hard to replicate any particular. It's a lot of detail work to go out and do what we do here at the Small Business Development Center all across the county, as an example, and we serve 3 counties. So it is a resource issue, you know, in terms of resource allocation, resource dollars to go out and do that. And I'd certainly welcome if there were more resources available for us to go out and do that in more smaller communities. But I think the chamber has also played a pretty good role in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a question in the back.
Jennifer?
I'm Jen Post-Tyler, the Interim Executive Vice President at Thrive, and I just wanted to comment on what you were saying at the beginning of this question, Mark, talking about business interviews and making those relationships with business, whether it's the county executive or another representative of Dane County. We do have that infrastructure in place at the regional basis. We have a program called Business Link that uses an underlying software called Synchronist. And so all the economic development professionals in the region can plug into that, and it's a coordinated interview program of sitting down, reaching out to businesses, talking about some specific questions with them, but then that data goes into the system and it allows each municipality, each county, and then us overall as a region to get some real-time data on how businesses in the region are doing. It was a need that was identified about 1.5 years ago, and so Thrive, with funding from MG&E and Alliant Energy, were able to secure that license. And it's really exciting to see how it's already taken off in some communities. I think our colleagues in Rock County really are leading the way, but just recently we saw Mayor Soglin and also DMI partnering to commit to interview 70 businesses within the city of Madison, get that data into Business Link right away so that we can continue to have informed conversations. I think it does 2 things for you. It builds the relationship with the businesses, but it also gives us real-time data about what's really going on in the region.
Fair question. Mm-hmm. If I could ask you a question relating to Thrive, I'm curious. A lot of times when I've talked about, you know, developing an economic development entity that works on a regional basis and coordinates, people say, well, Thrive does that. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts from the Thrive perspective of what roles that this entity could play. Is it similar to what you're hearing with the coordination, and how is this different from what you do? I mean, how do Thrive and this entity interact and intersect?
I think we could have a conversation about that for a little while, and I'll be very interested to see. I think between myself and other members of the Thrive team, you'll see one of us at each one of these sessions, right, because this is great input for us as well. So I'd like to reserve, you know, some of that judgment, but I think some of the things that I think it was Ken mentioned earlier, that there was some role to play in terms of coordinating among the disparate plans. You probably heard a little bit about what we have in the works with the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy process, which kind of going by the brand name of Advance Now, which will kick off next month and culminate in a detailed implementation plan by March. But part of that is designed to fill that gap that we really did have a gap in 6 of our 8 counties where there was no comprehensive economic development strategy of record on file with the federal government. That having that on file enables us to obtain the Economic Development District designation, which previously Dane County and 5 of the other counties in the region didn't have. So when any of our municipalities or counties were writing federal grants, we kind of had to find a strategy to point to say why our request was important. So I think the timing of your initiative and Advance Now, I think, works really well together, because you'll have great data that we'll be able to use as part of that process ongoing. I think coordinating economic development professionals, certainly we have an infrastructure for that, but if there's more coordination that makes sense just among the folks in Dane County, we'd be happy to help with that, partner with that, or just be a liaison, whatever seems to make sense as we move forward. Right now we have a program where quarterly all of the economic development professionals from around the 8 counties and the municipalities within the counties and then other affiliated organizations get together. So, there's about 80 people on that mailing list. Usually about 30 of us get together once a quarter, and that rotates around the counties.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Other thoughts or ideas? We're nearing the end of our time together. We want to make sure everybody's had a chance to weigh in here. while you have the opportunity to do it, we don't want to cut anybody off. Lisa?
I know, I always talk.
Yeah, you're never at a loss for words, right? My good friend. Lisa Johnson.
Well, I had to leave for like an hour, so I felt okay.
Runs SEMBA, a biotechnology company.
Hi, I'm Lisa Johnson with SEMBA Biosciences. This might be an odd one, and I don't know if anyone brought up the Madison Airport at all. Was that ever addressed?
No.
Okay,
No.
good.
All right,
Okay, come up with a new one for you.
you.
From experience from Novogen, which was a very successful biotech company, starting in the research park, and we were eventually sold to a German company and shut down, and they moved Novogen out. And one of the main reasons, believe it or not, they moved out is they felt that Madison was very difficult to get to. So I don't know if there's a creative marketing, and I know we don't want to lose business to Milwaukee, but one of my suggestions, because I have a feeling in the next year or two, SEMBA will also be sold. I mean, that can be a good thing to be owned by a very large company, but for Madison, it ends up usually meaning it's a very bad thing because they want to, in the biotech industry, they usually shut us down here. I mean, it may take a few years, but eventually it happens. So we have to overcome this perception with the international community that Madison is a difficult place to get in and out of. And, you know, at first I actually marked on your survey it wasn't important to work with other counties, but now I changed that because I think there's a way that we can even market with Milwaukee that they do have a lot of direct flights to places. And again, I don't want to lose the business either out of Madison, but I do think we have to come up with a creative marketing angle out of Dane County that this place is not as difficult as it seems to appear internationally to get in and out of, even though all of us have had some troubles getting in and out of Madison. But it's a great airport. It's a beautiful airport. It's so easy as far as just being able to get out of quickly. It's just that it doesn't have a lot of direct flights. So I know that's kind of an odd one coming from a biotech company, but it is amazing with customers, business relationships, and again, being purchased by larger companies, how it really is a disadvantage to us in Madison. And I think somehow, I don't know what that creative marketing is, but somehow we have to change that perception that this is a place to do business. Even as you buy the biotech companies, keep the businesses here. It's not difficult to get here. Keep us here. So that's some input to you.
You know, that's exactly the type of information we want to hear. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I know that the Chamber in the past historically has tried to work with the independent airlines on some of their direct flights to certain key cities like Dallas and Atlanta and San Diego and that kind of thing. The infrastructure of this airport that's owned by all of you, the county airport, is fabulous. I mean, almost incomparable around the country when you fly into a lot of different regional, smaller city airports. And so what's lacking is this flight scheduling issue. And whether or not the county executive can use the bully pulpit working with the airport, what is it, board? Is that what it's called? The advisory board that runs the airport?
Airport Commission.
Airport Commission, yes. Or helping the Chamber, Thrive, and others, you know, raise this issue of direct flights, which we hear about that from venture capitalists who want to invest in our companies here in the research park and throughout this region. It's so hard to get to. They, you know, fly into Chicago. The flight from Chicago to Madison is dropped. Take the bus. Good for the bus company, bad for the relationship. So it's a big issue.
Yeah, and as you know, that's been one of the casualties of the recession also has been direct flights in the smaller cities. So that's a very important issue.
So yeah, and like I said, I don't want to necessarily give business to Milwaukee, but it's not that bad of drive from, again, for your international business, it's not that bad. I mean, in Germany, I was always driving an hour and a half out of Frankfurt to go somewhere. Okay, so they're used to the driving or the train after that. So I mean, that's where sometimes I think we are going to have to be creative for Wisconsin in combining counties to promote this image internationally, because that's what it is, especially in the biotech business. You don't survive unless you're international. That there has to be this perception of this kind of regional basis, and it's not that difficult among all of us. I mean, I've gone to Whitewater. I mean, they run into the same thing. So anything like that, I think that we can try and combine And because there is so much biotech business that we can come together, and that's an image that we portray as this whole, kind of that southern part of Wisconsin, I think could do a lot for the job growth and the biotech business in this area.
Thank you.
So.
Ken Harwood, we have time for probably one, maybe two more questions, and then we'll be at 4 o'clock. And go ahead, Ken.
I just wanted to follow up. I can get on a bus at the Union and I can go to the Milwaukee Airport and the Chicago Airport, but I can't go to the Dane County Airport. That's a problem. And with regard to Thrive, they've done a wonderful job of creating a region. I think what Dane County really needs to do is separate to some degree Madison from Dane County so that people know that Dane County includes Fitchburg and Verona and Sun Prairie and Monona, Middleton, that there's really a microcosm of opportunities for all kinds of businesses, from this park to tech in Fitchburg, and there's just a whole wealth of opportunities for businesses to consider. And when IBM came knocking, we didn't have our ducks in a row to sit down and say, here's what we have to offer. We sort of sent them here and sent them here, and they talked to Mark, but when they went to Dubuque said, here's what we have, and they gave them a whole gamut of opportunities.
Right. One more question, one more issue. Jim, you want to say anything? Jim Morbacher from Madison Gas and Electric. Don't mean to put you on the spot, Jim.
Former county supervisor.
Yeah, former county supervisor.
Thanks. Jim Morbacher, Business Development Manager at Madison Gas and Electric for 27 years. And so basically, the opportunity to be part of a support network is, I think, a key thing. I think Zach Brandon had captured a lot of things that I wanted to say, and Ken about the Thrive and the collaboration. I went down to Raleigh, North Carolina for a visit years and years ago before Research Park and the Innovation Center was made. I talked to a person and to a company. They said you need 3 things. You need a great support network. And we really didn't have a great support network in Dane County. There wasn't really an entity in the county, the city, really wasn't doing economic development or business development per se. And they said you need 3 things. You need infrastructure, like facilities like the Innovation Center and other incubators, labs and things for startup companies. You need capital. You need both human capital, skilled quality workforce, and investment capital. And we were pretty short on, we had a pretty high quality workforce, but very short on the investment capital, and which is now gaining a lot of momentum with the angel investments and other venture debt fund. Frank, I think, left, and we're part of this venture debt fund, which helps companies with debt and some equity financing. And the third thing was awareness and recognition. And real quickly, one of the reasons I think MG&E got involved with the Innovation Center was to try to be a collaborator and part of that support network, raising awareness. No one's going to really know about all the asset building about the Madison-Dane County region unless we tell them about it. So that's kind of how the high-tech directory got created. Been doing that for 25 years now, but for all these years, I never realized what kind of resource that was going to be. People have found jobs with that. Other companies have found strategic partners with that. So I guess, continuing to develop the support network in those 3 areas, I think for the county to find a way, to find a niche, to find the way to be, to raise awareness through some kind of marketing, creative messaging, as Lisa mentioned, and being this portal and this aggregator. I worked with Olivia on the development guide and collaborated with the county on that. So those are just a few thoughts.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Well, we're at the appointed hour, and I, first of all, want to give a shout out to MG&E. This is called the MG&E Innovation Center. They were very supportive in the development of this facility and continue to be a great corporate citizen. This is not a paid advertisement or anything, but just Jim reminded me of their considerable support not only here but throughout the county, Fitchburg and other places in Dane County. And thank the county executive for coming and being willing to listen about these very important issues that are important to all of us. And thank all of you for taking 2 hours out of your day to come out today and have a very interesting dialogue on some of the important issues that will affect our county for many years to come. So thanks to the county executive. We appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, Mark, thank you, and thank you for hosting today, and everyone for being here. As I said, this is the first in a series of 6. It's been very informative. I appreciate you taking the time. Again, we'll have at least 5 more summits. The next one is Thursday at Saris at 2. So as I said at the beginning, even if it doesn't fit into the specific sector you may be involved in, if you feel like you want to continue to have input, if you think of anything else between now and then, please feel free to show up or to share more information with us over the website. And thanks again. Have a great
Fill out your questionnaires. Make sure you do that. Thank you.